In Japan, in the year 1970, massive destruction happened because of a monster invasion, and the high-rank sorcerers all gathered together to fight the creatures, and every mage unleashed his magic at the monsters, but nothing managed to affect them, so they lost hope and felt certain they were going to die, and just when one of the beasts stretched its hand forward to seize them, the strongest sorcerer in the entire world and the creator of magic himself, Ishikami Atsumo, suddenly appeared and told them to escape quickly, so they all became overwhelmed with joy to the point of tears and regained their hope again before their eyes. Today, and one of the monsters charged at Atsumo, but Atsumo surpassed it in speed and dodged it, and he used his extremely powerful magic and eliminated it, and he pointed toward the rest of the creatures with full confidence and told them to attack him all together, and suddenly, the strongest monster among them appeared. The one who was the commander of this calamity taking place, and it was the first time Atsumo ever saw it. So he sensed its power and the pressure filling the air, and the monster that Atsumo had cut earlier rose again, and suddenly they launched strong magical beams at him, and Atsumo avoided them skillfully, and he became confused that the monster was using all its power from the very beginning, and he found that it had released 6 elements at the same time. So Atsumo created a very strong barrier to resist the magic with difficulty, but an explosion occurred that struck him and made Atsumo fall to the ground. And he said to himself that at this rate he would never win the battle, and he decided to use every single particle of magical energy within his body because there was no other option, and a massive power burst out of him, and he formed many magical circles. And the magical power was ranked according to the number of magic circles, and the highest rank the Calamity Commander could reach was 14, while Atsumo maximum limit was 15, and he actually did it and wiped out all the monsters with extremely powerful beams. And because he consumed all the magic within his body in that attack, Atsumo fell on his back and died. But his soul transferred into the body of a person in a hospital struggling with death. So, Atsumo rose, shocked that he was still alive after what he had done. And he ran quickly to the mirror and found another person in front of him who was not him. And, on the bed, was written the name Kusanagi Minato, who was the one he had entered. And the doctor and the nurse entered and were surprised that he was standing normally on his feet. So the doctor examined him and was shocked that he had become completely healthy after his condition had been extremely critical. And the doctor mocked him, saying it was as if he had been healed by great healing magic. So Atsumo said to himself that his body actually healed automatically with great magic. And then he thought for a moment and asked the doctor if he had regained all his magical power. So the doctor became confused and asked him what he meant by magical power. So Atsumo replied that he had been killing the monsters in the calamity. So the doctor looked at the nurse nervously and asked Atsumo to tell him his name and the current year. So he answered that his name was Ishikami Atsumo and that it was the year 1970. So the doctor said maybe this was an effect of the accident, that it looked like a case of memory weakness. And he told Atsumo that no, his name was Kusanagi Minato, and they were now in the year 2022. So Atsumo was shocked and focused on their faces and did not feel they were lying. And he looked at the television in the room and found it with a clear picture and believed that he had moved to the future. At that moment, he understood the truth fully right then. And the doctor continued and told him that the calamity he was talking about had happened 50 years ago and had not appeared again since then. So Atsumo was shocked when he found something positive in the situation, and he asked him, what about the monsters? So the doctor replied that yes, there were still monsters, but not many, and the world was living in peace now. So Atsumo felt relieved and happy with that news, and the doctor continued saying that Ishikami Atsumo had died in the great calamity 50 years ago and had sacrificed himself to save the world. So he was not that person. So Atsumo wondered why he had been transferred into the body of Kusanagi Minato. And after a few weeks, Atsumo left the hospital and went to Minato House. And he was surprised that the house was very luxurious and Minato room was nice. And he tried to adapt to the situation that he had now become Minato. And he found a picture of Minato with his father and mother who had died when he was a child. And he learned that there had been adoptive parents who took him for a while and then expelled him afterward. And they sent him to a boarding school to live in. And since then, he had been living on the inheritance of his deceased parents, and he found in his wallet the ID card of the magic school that Minato used to attend. So he felt that he had found something interesting, unlike his old life, in which he had no purpose at all back then. And suddenly, he heard Minato phone ringing, so he grabbed it without knowing what it was, and he read the name of the caller, Tadano, but he did not know how to answer, because he had never used such phones before, and he threw it. And he went out immediately to the magic school, and he felt very happy with the place, and his heart was beating strongly. But he noticed something he did not like at all. The magic level of the students in the school was very bad, so he became confused and asked himself what had happened to magic in the 50 years that had passed, and if this could be because of the long period of peace they had lived. He went then to his class, feeling huge disappointment. Then his mood changed slightly, and he became excited for the start of studying, and he wondered if Minato had any friends in the class. And suddenly he heard the loud shouting of an irritated person calling him, and with arrogance he told him he had ignored his call and his message that morning, calling him completely foolish Minato. So Minato asked him who he was, and Tadano was shocked and kicked the desk in front of Minato. And he angrily asked how he dared forget Tadano Jun, calling him a useless fool, and with full indifference and sarcasm, Minato replied, Tadano. I remembered, asking if he was his friend in any way at all. So Tadano and his gang mocked him, and told him that now he remembered, calling him an idiot, and he extended his hand for Minato to give him the money he had. But Minato surprised him by grabbing his hand to shake it normally. So Tadano pulled his hand away, and grabbed him by the clothes, telling him to give him the money he had, saying that he had a big inheritance so he should hand over some, and Minato understood that he had been bullied in the school, and Tadano raised his fist to hit him, but suddenly they were interrupted by the entrance of their classmate Mizuhaya Yuika, whom Tadano liked and feared appearing bad in front of. So he whispered to Minato not to forget to bring the money, calling him an idiot. And he left the class and walked out. And then the history lesson began, and the teacher told them about the greatness of Ishikami Atsumo, who had sacrificed himself to save humanity. So Minato sat extremely embarrassed because the whole lesson was about him and his former life. And the teacher asked them what else they knew about Ishikami Atsumo. So Yuika stood with full enthusiasm and said he was the only survivor of the first calamity and the first sorcerer, and the reason this magic school was founded, the hero of the world and the role model of every mage. And Minato wished the class would finish quickly. And a huge explosion happened in the class, so Yuika shouted at them and Tadano became afraid she might judge him. So he told her that Minato was the one who wanted to cause trouble with him, that it was not his fault. And the smoke cleared and everyone was shocked that Minato was standing untouched as if nothing happened. And with sarcasm he told Tadano if he was finished, and Tadano stood with his mouth open, unable to understand what had happened. And Minato said to himself that if the magic level was 1, then his barrier would easily block it without any effort from him at all, and he intended to punish him for what he had done. And he looked at him with a terrifying gaze, and it was clear that Tadano had begun to fear him. And Minato magical energy burst out and made everyone in the class unable to move, and they all asked what that magical energy was. And Minato slowly approached Tadano, but before he grabbed him the school principal entered and angrily asked who was using magic. And Minato's reaction was faster, and he cancelled his magic as if nothing had been happening, and he smiled at the principal and told him that nothing had happened in the class, that the sound might have come from outside. So the principal became angry because there was no magic use club in the school and using magic was forbidden. So Minato told him someone outside the department might be using it, that sorcerers always saved their magic and would not waste it. So the principal believed him and told everyone he would see who caused it. And Yuika looked at Minato in confusion, and Tadano thought angrily and insulted Minato. But what occupied Minato's mind was how these weak students were supposed to fight any monster that appeared. And he decided to go investigate himself to know if there were any monsters in the area around the place at that moment. And he moved already, and he jumped into the air using his magic while remaining hidden, and he tried to sense the presence of any monsters within the range around him. And he actually felt the aura of a monster coming from very far away, and he also sensed a human running from that creature quickly. And indeed on the other side, there were wolf-like monsters surrounding a woman in a corner and about to kill her. But Minato arrived at the right moment and used earth magic to make sharp fangs rise from the ground and kill them all. And he looked at the woman who was shocked, and he noticed her police badge, so he became even more annoyed that even the police were at such a low level and unable to deal with monsters, while the officer saw him as an incredibly powerful sorcerer. And she also noticed that he had not spoken any incantations before casting the spell. And Minato left saying he had been right to hide his face, that he did not want to appear and draw attention, and he thought sadly about how the students and the police could not kill even the lowest level monster. And he said to himself that even in this era they still needed his abilities, and he decided to eliminate all monsters nearby. And on the next day at school, the principal gathered all the students in front of the magic power measuring device, and he told them to make sure they showed their power and attributes today, because this evaluation was very important if they wanted to become professional sorcerers. So Minato became very nervous and wished he could measure his magical power in another way, because he felt the device would not endure his enormous strength. And he said to himself that not only the students, but the teachers also knew nothing about the basics. And Yuika went to speak with Minato, so all the students looked at him with jealousy, surprised, because because she never talked to anyone at all, although she was standing there, and she told him she was the second daughter of the Mizuhaya family, a noble magic family. So Minato became confused and asked her what noble magic meant, and she became annoyed that he did not know, and told him they were one of 4 noble families and the leaders of sorcerers. So Minato became even more surprised because in his old life, nothing like that existed, and he had never even heard of a family called Mizuhaya. And he looked at her magical aura and felt it was not as great as she claimed. And Yuika could not understand the indifferent expressions on his face after she had shown him kindness and spoken to him so generously. And Tadano watched them feeling jealous of Minato. And Minato asked Yuika what noble sorcerers had to do with him. So Yuika became even more irritated and tried to calm herself and hold her temper. And her main goal from the conversation was to ask him about what had happened yesterday. But before she could ask, the principal interrupted them and told them the evaluation had begun. So Minato left her and walked away. And it became Tadano's turn, and he poured his magic into the device with full confidence, and the result came out as 1000, and his attribute was fire. So he became happy because his level had improved from the previous time, and he gained more confidence in himself. And Yuika entered after him and placed her magical energy into the device, and the result was 2000, and her attribute was water. So the principal praised them and told them they were the top students this year. And all the students looked at them with admiration and took them as their role models. While Minato, on the opposite side, saw 2000 as extremely low and that they were only beginners. And Yuika looked at him with pride and confidence. So Minato turned his face away, and suddenly the principal called him, and everyone watched eagerly, wanting to know how strong his magical power was, and all of them without exception believed he was weak and possessed no magical power at all, because last year he had been at the bottom of the list. And Minato stood before the device confidently, but thought about lowering his power so he would not attract too much attention. Yet, he changed his mind and said he would show them his true strength. And he poured an enormous amount of energy into the device, to the point that people outside the school felt his power and the device could not endure it, and exploded. And Minato became surprised that no one around him had sensed his magical power, even though that was supposed to be a basic skill for any sorcerer. And the principal checked on the students who had been injured by the explosion, then checked on Minato, because he had been at the center of it, but he found him completely fine. And he told him it was the first time the device had ever reacted like that it was surely broken, but that this was a problem because they would not know his magical power or his attribute. So Minato asked what was bad about that, and the principal replied that they had divided the students into groups and needed to know which one he should join. And he suddenly called Tadano and asked him to take Minato with him. So Tadano smiled wickedly and told him he was very excited. On the next day, the students set out for their first mission, which took place in areas that had been destroyed for a very long time and were full of monsters. They had to exterminate them so the places could be repaired and people could live there normally again. The principal reassured them that more than half of the monsters had already been wiped out by professional sorcerers, so there would not be any major danger for them. Minato stood there, surprised that they were starting with a practical lesson right away, but he thought it was good that the students would at least train a little on fighting monsters. Then, Minato realized that this was the same area he had visited the previous night, and he was confused about how monsters were here when he had already eliminated all of them. He wondered if this might be a sign of an upcoming catastrophe, but he felt nothing and found no signs. He overheard the students wanting to compete with each other and treating the situation like a joke, and he grew annoyed that they weren't taking their responsibility seriously. The principal gave the signal for the students to begin, and Tadano pushed Minato aside, telling him to stay in his place and not get in their way. Minato replied, telling him that if he didn't like him, he could simply ignore him. Tadano snapped back angrily, calling him trash and asking why Yuika cared so much about him. Minato was confused and sarcastically asked him whether he liked her or something. Tadano burned with anger, drew a magic circle, aimed it at Minato, and told him he was dead. Minato replied indifferently, telling him to look behind him. Tadano turned and was shocked to see a massive demonic soldier standing behind him, a high-level monster that wasn't supposed to exist in that area. A demon's strength and rank were determined by the number of crystals in its body. The wolf-like magical beast was rank 6, the demonic soldier was rank 5, the demonic commander was rank 4, the demonic officer rank 3, the demonic king rank 2, and the strongest demon of all was the supreme ruler, rank 1. Sedaon's entire gang panicked and told him to protect them. He became extremely nervous but claimed he could defeat it easily. He fired a fire shot at the demonic soldier, thinking the fight was over, but the monster wasn't affected at all. Minato looked at him and thought to himself that it was impossible to defeat a monster like this with Tadano magical level. The monster slowly approached Tadano and his friends, and they fell to the ground in fear. It extended its long, sharp claws toward them, but suddenly stopped when it sensed Minato magical power. It immediately retreated. retreated, realizing it was about to be struck by a powerful attack. Minato stepped forward and stood in front of Tadano and his gang, confidently saying that it was good. The monster understood who the strongest one among them was. The demonic soldier used second-level magic and launched rocks using the earth element, but Minato used fire and blasted all the rocks easily. The flames reached the demonic soldier as well and wounded him. Tadano and his gang were shocked. How had Minato killed a demonic soldier so quickly? They wondered if this was really the same weak Minato they knew. With the appearance of a demonic soldier in that place, Minato, feeling that a major catastrophe was approaching, grew stronger. He remembered the scenes of mass destruction from his old life and the people who died, and sadness overwhelmed him. He made a vow to himself that if another catastrophe ever happened, he would save everyone. A short while earlier, Yuika had been using her water magic, firing it at the monsters and killing them, and her classmates were extremely impressed by her strength. This increased Yuika's confidence and arrogance even more, and she said that ordinary people were nothing but a source of trouble, and since she was a genius, she needed to protect them. Then she noticed Tadano and his gang heading after Minato in one of the corridors, and assumed they were going to bully him. So she decided to stop them. But the attack of the demonic soldier happened, and she was startled, because she also knew that something like that wasn't supposed to be here. She moved to help them, but Minato was faster, using strong fire magic to block the rocks launched by the demonic soldier and injure it. She asked herself what had just happened. Did that really come from Minato? She said in her mind that she was sure he had always been just a shy person with no magical ability whatsoever, and she felt that he had become a completely different person. She also noticed that she hadn't heard any chant from him before he used such powerful magic. She said to herself that this demon needed level 3 magic to defeat it, so it was impossible for Minato, who was only level 1, to beat it. Suddenly, Minato told her that peeking wasn't a good habit. She asked him how he knew she was watching, and he told her that if she was truly a sorcerer, it wouldn't make sense that she didn't know. He asked them sarcastically, "You people can't sense magic?" Then he left. Yuika tried calling out to him so he could explain what he meant, but he vanished from before her eyes and appeared on the rooftop. There he used a magical ability in his eye to see all the monsters around him. He found that there were no more demonic soldiers, but there were many magical beasts. He thought about how difficult it would be for the students to deal with all of them, so he decided to reduce their numbers a bit. He fired second-level magical beams in every direction, and the other students saw them as meteor streaks falling from the sky, hitting the monsters and killing them before they attacked any of the students. Minato looked at the dead monsters and said to himself that he had probably gone too far and ended up killing them all instead of just reducing their numbers, and now none of the students would get any training. After that, Minato came down from the rooftop and saw the principal and all the students gathered around. He looked at the dead monsters and said, "How were there this many monsters here? I thought the entire pack had already been wiped out." He wondered how a single person could have gotten rid of all those monsters with one attack. Firing that many magic bullets at once was a forbidden technique. He had never seen anything like it before, but if it hadn't happened, things would have gotten far worse. He thought about how firing 1 or 2 shots at the same time was normal, but more than 6? That definitely wasn't something any of the students could have done. He heard the students screaming at the principal because he brought them to such a dangerous place and told them it was safe. The principal apologized and told them that the police had informed him the area was secure, and he also needed to confirm it for the school. They asked if someone had come to save them, and he said he didn't know, but he believed that person was neither a police officer nor a licensed sorcerer, yet they all should be grateful to whoever saved them. Minato smiled but didn't say anything. From that moment on, he kept hearing all the students talking about the sorcerer who saved them, all of them asking each other if anyone saw him. Yuika looked at Minato and thought to herself that he defeated a demonic soldier while being only level 1. Could he be the one who used the forbidden technique too? But then she said to herself that he used fire magic. How could he use a forbidden technique on top of that? A sorcerer was supposed to have only one skill. So she dismissed the idea completely, but she couldn't ignore the fact that he had killed a demonic soldier. Meanwhile, Tadano gang were discussing what happened, asking each other whether those magic beams they saw came from Minato. Tadano became extremely irritated because he refused to accept the idea that Minato was stronger than him. He told them something strange must be happening. They mocked him and said, "Wasn't he just a coward?" Tadano responded angrily, "Yes, he must be cheating somehow, and I'll make him reveal the truth." After the school day ended, Minato walked out of the building. Suddenly, a large group of students, including Tadano and his gang, surrounded him, telling him they had been waiting for him. Tadano's face looked terrifying, clearly intending harm. Minato replied sarcastically, saying that maybe learning magic would be better than wasting their time like this. Tadano snapped back furiously, telling him he had no right to speak because he was nothing but a cheating fraud. Minato was confused by the word cheater, and Tadano pointed a finger at his face, telling him to stop pretending there There was no way someone like him could endure that kind of magic. He accused Minato of using some dirty trick. Tadano told him he had him surrounded, so he wouldn't escape. Minato responded confidently that he didn't need to run in the first place. Tadano lost his temper and punched him in the face. Minato let him, knowing the punch wouldn't hurt him at all, because he had a magical barrier around his body that protected him automatically. Tadano gang joined in and kept hitting him, and Minato stayed still, pretending he was being hurt. Then Yuika arrived and yelled angrily, asking them what they were doing. Tadano froze instantly. He told her, "It nothing, we were just playing." But Yuika answered angrily, "No, I know you were bullying Minato. How are you even students in a magic academy? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves?"
Tadano grew even more furious at Minato, because thanks to him, Yuika now hated him. Yuika grabbed Minato's arm and told him to leave with her. Tadano was shocked and immediately drew a magic circle in his hand, shouting, "I'm going to kill you, Minato."
He and his entire gang fired magic shots at Minato. As usual, Minato stood still and took all the shots without moving. Tadano laughed mockingly, telling him that even cheating wouldn't save him from all that magical power. The rest of the gang grew scared, thinking he might be dead. Tadano told them confidently not to worry, that they would simply claim the spell went out of control and Minato got injured. The smoke slowly cleared, revealing that the ground had been completely destroyed, yet Minato was standing there unharmed, and Yuika was behind him on the ground, shocked. Minato told them, "It seems stupidity has no cure except death." Tadano began sweating nervously. Minato told him, "How could you drag Yuika into something like this?" Tadano snapped back, yelling, "You're wrong. How dare you toy with me?" Tadano drew another spell, and the rest of the gang followed him. This time, Minato decided to fight. He drew a magic circle, but it was extremely small. They mocked him and fired at him again, but from Minato's tiny circle, vines burst out, nullifying their spells and wrapping around all of them, draining their magic until they fell unconscious. Minato walked closer and looked at them, thinking to himself, "I only absorbed a tiny bit of their energy, and they all passed out. Maybe this will make them think twice before fighting someone like me." Yuika was still frozen in shock, asking herself what he had just done. Was that even magic? And why are Tadano and his whole gang unconscious? Early, she shouted his name angrily, asking him, "What did you just do? Was that magic? You weren't supposed to even be able to use magic, right?" "Who exactly are you?" Minato sighed internally, annoyed, and replied, "Instead of all these questions, shouldn't you be telling me something first?" She blushed and said, "Right. Thank you for saving me. Now answer my questions." Then she looked forward again, only to find he had disappeared. Later at night, Minato moved again through the city, trying to see if there were still monsters left or not. He was disappointed to find a large number of monsters again, even though he had wiped them all out earlier that morning. He said to himself that if the problem was only in this area, he could handle it alone. But the real issue was that he could sense monsters in other places too. He believed there were far too many for the police to handle, and since sorcerers weren't strong enough, things would become really bad, and he wouldn't be able to deal with all of them by himself. He decided to eliminate the monsters first, then think of a plan. He used the same light magic that looked like falling meteors. At the same time, a man was walking down the street, barely conscious, when a magical beast attacked him. Minato appeared instantly and dragged the monster into an alley so the man wouldn't see him or recognize his face. But unfortunately, someone else had been watching from afar, recording everything, and they uploaded the video onto social media. The next day at school, Minato, Tadano, and Yuika were summoned to the office of the school president and the principal. The principal told them, "We discovered that some students were seen using magic outside the school. If that's true, then we have no choice but to expel them." Tadano immediately said, "It wasn't us. Minato came and tried to start trouble with us." Minato thought to himself that this time he couldn't stay silent. The situation was ridiculous, but he needed to defend himself. But suddenly, Yuika spoke before he could, telling the principal, "All of that is a lie. Tadano and his friends were bullying Minato, and they were the ones who used magic first." The principal asked her in surprise, "First? Meaning Minato also used magic?" Yuika replied, "Yes, he was only defending himself. He didn't do anything wrong." Tadano tried to speak to defend himself, but Yuika cut him off, shouting, "Shut up! You bullied him and now you're blaming him too?" Tadano answered nervously, "Minato is just a lunatic who doesn't deserve to be in this school anyway. I was only trying to clean up the trash." Yuika snapped back, "You're the one who doesn't deserve to be at this school," Tadano said. "I'm at the top of of the class. I'm the only one who deserves to stand beside you, not that idiot Minato, Yuika asked in confusion. What do you mean? Tadano told her. Look properly and stop defending that worthless guy.
I like you,
she responded naturally. Impossible. You're a violent bully. Minato felt that Tadano deserved those words, but they were still harsh. The school president interrupted them, saying Tadano and his friends are the guilty ones, and we don't need people who use magic for selfish reasons. He shouted in their faces, "You are expelled." The principal told Yuika and Minato they could return to their class. They left the office, and Yuika was still extremely angry. Minato asked her what would happen to Tadano and his gang now that they were expelled. She replied, "They'll never become sorcerers." Then she yelled at him, "You need to defend yourself." Minato thought to himself that he was going to speak anyway, but she said everything before he could. He told her, "By the way, how many times have you tried to save me so far? In class, during the fight with Tadano, and in the principal office. You're actually a good girl." Yuika blushed deeply, her face turning red, and she quickly left. Minato stood there thinking, could it be that the original Minato, the owner of this body, was bullied so much that he died? Or was it really just a car accident like the doctor said? Meanwhile, in the president's office, Ms. Ohaya, Rokai's sister, stood with her partner, Ryuji. Both were third-year students from Class S, the highest rank. Roka asked, there was a fight between students, and they used magic outside the school. The president replied, yes, but no civilians were harmed. She asked, confused, then why did you call me here? He said, because the student involved in the fight was your sister Yuika. She thanked him for informing her, and he asked her to send his regards to her parents. She told him not to worry. Her family would continue supporting the school as agreed. After leaving, Ryuji told her that if what the president said was true, then Minato must be strong. Roka replied, fighting that many sorcerers alone is nearly impossible, and someone wouldn't win unless the difference in power was huge. Ryuji asked if she thought he might be stronger than them. Roka said,
Of course not, but I'm curious. We'll check for ourselves, and after that, I'll decide if my sister should be expelled from here or not.
Meanwhile, Minato was in his classroom, feeling extremely bored. He overheard students talking about a video, calling the person in it the Black Sorcerer. Minato was confused and assumed it was some noble sorcerer terminology, so he didn't care. Then the principal entered and called him, along with the students who still hadn't measured their magic power. Minato went, and Yuika followed him eagerly, wanting to know his magic power. But she was shocked to see her older sister standing there. Minato stood before the device again, thinking that he needed to be careful this time. He placed his hand on it and began releasing magic, pretending to be exhausted, as if he couldn't push any more power into it. Everyone was shocked to see him that weak, especially after expecting a number they had never seen before. The final number that appeared was 100. Everyone called him useless, and Ryuji told Roka they came for nothing. She walked toward the door and said their task was finished. Minato continued pretending, and everyone mocked him for struggling during a simple evaluation. The principal tried to comfort him so he wouldn't feel bad. Yuika stood there in disbelief. How could someone who defeated a demonic soldier have such low magic power? Minato, however, was delighted inside because he had successfully hidden his true power. He left the room and walked with Yuika. He asked her why she had come, and she replied that she was just curious. Suddenly, Roka and Ryuji appeared and blocked their path. Minato was confused and asked them who they were. Roka introduced herself and her friend. Minato asked what they needed, and she told him her business with him was finished. Then she turned to Yuika and said, I heard someone with magic power 100 saved you. You should leave the academy. Yuika was shocked and asked why she should do that. Roka asked arrogantly, have you ever defeated me even once in your life? In studies? Sports? Magic? You always lose to me in everything. You don't deserve to be a sorcerer. Leave this school and go to an ordinary one. Yuika froze, unable to reply. Minato, without thinking, told Roka, you're arrogant. You're talking non-stop without even letting the other person speak. Roka snapped, this is a family matter. You have no right to interfere. Minato smirked and asked, you call this a conversation? You're ordering your sister around. Roka grew irritated, and Minato continued, you have no right to force anyone, even if you're from her family. Roka replied pridefully, my sister has no qualifications to be a sorcerer. She has never beaten me, even once. Yuika's eyes filled with tears as she thought, she right. I have no talent. I've just been lying to myself, convincing myself that I'm a genius, hoping I could become one someday. Her thoughts were interrupted when Minato said to Roka, she can beat you easily. Not now, but maybe after 2 weeks. So how about we fight 2 versus 2? Minato looked at Yuika and asked her what she thought. She gathered her courage and said she would participate too. Minato told Roka that it's settled. If we win, you won't bring this up again. Roka replied, fine. And if we win, Yuika will leave the academy. They agreed and went their separate ways. Minato and Yuika went up to the rooftop, and Yuika asked him to teach her more about magic. He sighed and told her, I'm a weak sorcerer with a magic power power of 100. Are you sure you want to learn from someone like me? She replied, I know you're hiding your true strength. You're definitely stronger than me. She added, you must know a way to make me stronger. That's why I told my sister I could do it. Minato thought to himself that people like her always wanted to control everything around them. That was why he provoked Roka into suggesting the duel. But of course, he couldn't say that. She begged him sincerely, so he agreed, telling her she had to do everything he said and never give up halfway. She accepted immediately, and he asked where they would train. She blushed and said, come to my house. They went to her home, which had a massive training courtyard. The place was luxurious and expensive looking, and Minato was impressed. They started right away. Minato asked her, what exactly is magical power? She answered confidently, it's the energy inside the body that you need to cast spells. He then asked her what spells were. She replied, a technique that converts magical power into a craft. He asked whether someone could increase their magical power, and she confidently said it was impossible, because the limit was determined before birth and stopped increasing after a certain age. She smiled proudly, believing all her answers were correct. But Minato shocked her by saying that everything she said was wrong. He thought to himself that no one would have imagined an entire generation was being taught incorrectly. He explained that magical power wasn't only inside the body, it was also in the nature around them. He told her that spells were merely supportive tools for one magical craft, and that increasing magical power was absolutely possible. Eureka snapped, that all nonsense. If what you're saying is true, the entire Magic Academy system would collapse. Minato replied, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. I'll teach you the 3 things anyway. He had her sit in front of him and told her he would inject magic into her body, and she should tell him when she felt it. She asked if someone could really feel magical power. He said, you'll never get stronger unless you do. He told her to close her eyes, then slowly increased the magic he poured into her until she felt warmth on her back. He stopped and told her, that magical awareness, you need to remember this feeling, and later you'll be able to sense the magical energy in nature as well. She confidently said, I'm from the Mizuhaya family. Of course I'll master this quickly. Minato looked at her confused. She only felt it after he poured an enormous amount of energy into her. After a week, she admitted she still couldn't do it. Minato was shocked that even after all the effort, she still struggled and learned slowly. He told her he would inject magic into her again. This time, Eureka saw the magical aura surrounding her body. She became excited and looked at Minato to see his magical aura, only to find it was barely visible to her. Minato told her, well done. Now that you've succeeded in sensing your magical power, it's time for you to learn how to control the amount of power when using your craft. He explained the method, telling her to use her power to the maximum, and after draining her magical energy, it would rise again after recovery. She asked, isn't that similar to the basic techniques we did at school? Minato said she didn't have to believe him. She cut him off and said, I believe you. I won't doubt you again. Minato grew excited, took off his jacket, and told her they would have a training battle. Eureka became excited too, and said she wanted to see his true power. She fired water rings at him, but he blocked them with a magical barrier. She was shocked that he could block her craft so easily. Minato told her that if she couldn't break this barrier, she would never defeat Roka. Eureka tried again, and Minato told her she needed to move. While using her craft, standing still would only make her lose. She kept trying until she was completely exhausted and collapsed. Minato told her she was using too much energy inefficiently. If she could control her magical power properly, she wouldn't even need spells anymore. He told her to get up and start again, but she couldn't move at all. Minato drew a magic circle and told her to train as if her life were on the line. Later that night, Minato went to another city to check for monsters. He found that their numbers were increasing despite the police campaign. He spotted a girl about to be attacked and immediately struck the magical beast, killing it. He asked if she was okay, but instead of thanking him, she took out her phone and started recording him. Minato left immediately. Days passed, and every day Minato trained Eureka and fought monsters at night. With only a few days left before the duel, Eureka still hadn't reached her sister level. Minato told her she could give up if she wanted. She stood up and said, they always compared me to my sister, and I could never beat her. I had to give up on so many things, but my magical craft is the only thing I won't give up on. Minato told her she still wouldn't win like this. She replied, then train me harder. Be stricter. Minato became fired up and pushed her to the limit until she eventually fell asleep from exhaustion. At sunset, he carried her back home. A few days later, he told her she had finally passed the training, and at last, the day of the duel arrived. As soon as they entered the academy, they found a huge crowd of reporters outside, all asking Eureka about the duel between her and her sister. Minato finally understood how important it was to be part of a noble family. They went to the arena, where an enormous number of people had gathered to watch the match. Minato tried to calm Eureka and encourage her before the fight. Eureka stepped forward to face her sister. Roka asked her if she still wasn't planning to surrender. Yuika confidently replied, "Never." Roka said, surprised, "You really think you can beat me?" Yuika boldly answered, "Yes." The battle began. Yuika launched her water magic faster than Roka, but not fast enough to gain the advantage. Roka fired as well, and the two spells canceled each other out. Yuika was thrilled. Her power had increased. Roka admitted Yuika had indeed gotten stronger than before, but said she wasn't praising her, only comparing. She then fired a second-level spell, pushing Yuika out of the ring. Roka approached Minato and said mockingly, "You're so cruel. Aren't you going to run and protect her like last time?" Minato replied, "There's no need." Roka was shocked when Yuika stood up again and said she wouldn't surrender. She attacked again with all her strength, and the spells canceled out once more. But this time, Yuika collapsed from magical exhaustion. The referee declared Roka the winner. Yuika trembled on the ground, deeply frustrated that she had lost. Arrogantly, Roka said to Minato, "I think you understand now. This girl has no talent." Minato jumped into the ring and replied, "True, she has no talent, and she barely improves. She even weaker in real battles, but she works hard, and she never stops trying. Yuika trained every single day like crazy." Roka mocked him, saying, "And this is the result." Minato answered, "She lost, yes, but I like people who work hard, like Yuika." Yuika cried upon hearing his words. Roka snapped at him, "You're acting very proud for someone with magic power 100. Minato confidently replied, "Even with 100, I'll defeat you." He told her, "You know how to make jokes, but I'm not the one who will fight you." Ryuji prepared himself and switched places with Roka. He told them to finish the fight quickly. Minato carried Yuika to a chair and asked her to watch the match closely. Back in the ring, Ryuji said, "I won't go easy on you." The entire crowd cheered for Ryuji, whose magical power was 8,000. Because Minato had declared he would fight with magic power 100, everyone expected him to behave accordingly and not exceed that. That meant he wouldn't have a protective magical shield around him and had to be careful. Ryuji drew 3 magic circles and intended to test Minato to see if he was the one who had beaten Tadano and his gang. Suddenly, Minato fired a magic shot straight at his forehead and said, "You're very slow." The match ended with Minato victory. Roka rushed to Ryuji and was shocked to find him unconscious from such a small blow. She was even more surprised that she hadn't heard any incantation from Minato before he fired. She suspected some trick. Roka told him, "You're good in a fight." He answered confidently, "Better than you." He looked at her magic power reading and saw it was 10,000 stronger than Ryuji. The third match against Roka began. Minato fired the same shot he had used on Ryuji, but since his declared power was 100, meaning his craft was supposed to be weak, it shouldn't have affected her unless he aimed for her head. Roka blocked the shots aimed at her head. She countered quickly with water magic, but he cancelled it easily while standing still. Roka was shocked that he hadn't been hurt, and that he hadn't even appeared to use any spell to block it. Everyone watching wore the same stunned expression, and even Yuika couldn't understand how he had neutralized the attack without getting wet. Roka tried raising the level and launched multiple water shots at him, but he skillfully dodged them all. Roka became more anxious. Yuika realized he was countering magical craft with an opposing craft, allowing him to survive fights even when the power gap was huge. As Roka increased her level, the mass and speed of her attacks grew. It seemed impossible to dodge them the way he did, but he continued as if he didn't know fear. Minato thought to himself that anyone who could sense magic and determine its direction could dodge magical attacks. Roka reached level 3 and unleashed a tremendous amount of water. Everyone expected Minato to be seriously hurt. Roka dropped to her knees from the effort, yet she herself was struck in the middle of the head by the same blow Ryuji had received. She looked forward to find Minato standing there unhurt. She demanded angrily, "How?" He replied coldly, "I used a magic dryer ability. It lets me nullify a magical craft and pass through it." Roka sneered, "Pass through it? Mexi." She conceded and said to Minato, "As I promised, I won't speak or interfere again. Do as you please." From the tone of her voice, Minato noticed that everything she had done for Yuika was out of concern for her. He told her the wound Yuika had wasn't serious, and that she was just trying not to show her worry. Roka tried to deny it, but the truth was out. Minato told her Yuika had become stronger in 2 weeks, and that Roka should stop overprotecting her. Yuika answered, "I will be stronger, don't worry about me." The two of them smiled together. Suddenly Minato felt a very strange magical power. He looked up at the sky and realized a disaster was about to occur. Meanwhile, Tadano and his gang were rifling through Minato's bag, hoping to find some device he used to make his magic so powerful. Of course they found nothing. His strength was natural and required no tools. Suddenly one of them cried out and told the others to look out the window. The whole sky had turned red. They realized a catastrophe was coming. At the arena, tension spread among the spectators. Minato looked up at the sky, wondering why the disaster had returned. Was it connected to Shinjuku, the city where the previous catastrophe had begun, or was it just a coincidence? Suddenly, students began screaming as magical beasts appeared. Minato fired his golden bullets at them and used a sound-amplifying spell to shout to the students. Calm down. Only weak monsters will come from the disaster gate. Stay composed and act wisely. Go all to the gym and move in groups. Their walking alone will be dangerous. Yuika asked him what he intended to do. He answered that he would go rescue the students inside the school. The principal was shocked and said it was reckless for him to go alone. But Ryuji volunteered. I'll go with him. The principal agreed and advised them not to overexert themselves. Ryuji ran and taunted him. You can keep up with my speed? He was surprised to find Minato running even faster. Ryuji, excited, said speed alone isn't enough. I'm waiting to see you fight. On their way, Minato sensed the magical energy of 58 people inside the school. Though he assumed some occupants might have hidden power, he decided to search the whole school. Inside, he encountered magical beasts attacking students and picked them off one by one with his magic bullets. A creature leapt at him from behind, but without looking, Minato fired a shot and killed it. Ryuji was astonished by his skills. Minato told him, I'll handle evacuation. No, wait. It's dangerous for you to go alone. Before he could finish, Minato had already moved. Ryuji felt simultaneously that Minato had become a burden he couldn't ignore, but he wouldn't complain, because that was the truth now, and he wondered who Minato really was. Minato considered using his multi-shot bullets on all the monsters in the school, but that would endanger the remaining students. He chose instead to track down and kill monsters one by one. He rescued a group of students trapped in a classroom. Ryuji, up on the roof, also rescued some students. Suddenly, Ryuji saw 3 students descending from the sky using levitation magic. He guessed Minato was the one who had done it and was more impressed. A girl stood on the stairs surrounded by magical beasts screaming for help. Minato appeared and eliminated the monsters surrounding the girl. She remembered that the same thing had happened to her before and asked him, Were you the one who saved me during the practical training class too? He answered yes. She thanked him with tears in her eyes for saving her life twice. Ryuji arrived late, so Minato left her with him and continued on his way. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister held a meeting to discuss the disaster occurring at the academy. He told them they were still in contact with the anti-monster unit at the Metropolitan Police Department, and that they had contacted the noble sorcerers as well. Even the Special Disaster Defense Forces had prepared themselves. One of the attendees shouted that the defense forces had no specialists in monsters. The Prime Minister replied that he knew, and thought to himself that this was the negative consequence of living peacefully for so long without facing disasters. He slammed his fist on the table angrily, thinking, the disaster from 50 years ago has returned, but Ishikami Atsumo is no longer with us. Meanwhile, the policewoman Minato had saved earlier was in a patrol car with her colleague Shido, a detective in the anti-monster unit. They discussed the ongoing disaster. News of the incident spread across Japan. Students at the academy attempted to fight the monsters alongside the principal, but they were unable to defeat them all because the numbers were overwhelming. Minato realized they were close to entering the second stage of the disaster, meaning the monsters would appear in higher levels and in greater numbers. The disaster wouldn't end until they defeated the leader. Minato continued rescuing people he found and transported them to the shelter using his magic. Meanwhile, in the classroom where Tadano and his gang were hiding, another demonic soldier appeared. As before, Tadano couldn't deal with it with his current magical level, and his gang cried in terror. Tadano slammed his fist on the ground, screaming why Minato could kill such a monster in a single blow. Suddenly, a massive wave of fire shot past him and obliterated the demonic soldier. Minato's voice echoed, saying, because you're weak. Tadano grew furious, because Minato had saved him for the second time. He screamed, why did you save me? Don't you hate me? Minato replied coldly, no special reason. I saved you because I can. That all, Tadano grew even angrier. Stop being ridiculous. You're just a coward who can't even use magic properly. How did you become this strong? Minato answered, Kusanagi Minato died in a car accident. I took over his body. Tadano asked in disbelief. So someone on the verge of death becomes stronger? If that's true, shouldn't I be stronger than you? Minato replied coldly, you? Strong? A strong person doesn't bully the weak, and a weak person doesn't bully someone even weaker than him. Your arrogance made you believe you were strong. But right now, you can't even imagine fighting me properly. Minato left, and Tadano collapsed to his knees in despair. He thought to himself bitterly that his strength hadn't improved since middle school, and that he had always run from that truth. That was why he took out all his frustration on those weaker than him. And now, he was saved by Minato, the one he always considered weaker. He couldn't accept it. Tadano cried in anguish, feeling utterly pathetic. Meanwhile, Minato continued hunting monsters, killing the rapidly increasing number of demonic soldiers and predicting that their leader would soon appear. Ryuji was also doing his best to protect the students. Minato met up with him to help, and told him to take the students and escape immediately. Ryuji was shocked, unable to believe Minato intended to fight such numbers alone, but Minato used multiple magic bullets freely now that he was in an open area. Ryuji was astonished and felt confident enough to leave Minato behind. After the monsters were defeated and Minato confirmed that Ryuji and the students had escaped, he headed back into the academy to ensure no one was left behind. Meanwhile, the principal, Yuika, and the remaining students fought desperately. Yuika was exhausted from magical strain, so her sister supported her and told her to retreat. Yuika refused, saying she wouldn't give up, not in front of her sister. Ryuji arrived and asked about the situation. Roka answered that they could barely hold the monsters back. Yuika anxiously asked where Minato was. Ryuji reassured her, telling her Minato was perfectly fine and that he was an incredible person. With him around, Ryuji was certain they would survive the disaster. Yuika regained her courage, agreeing with him. Suddenly, they all felt something ominous approaching. The principal shouted for everyone to evacuate quickly. A massive number of demonic soldiers and magical beasts descended in front of them, and they all ran. Suddenly, one of the magical beasts was struck by a powerful spell. They turned to see that the police had finally arrived. Shido told them not to worry. They were safe now. All the officers launched fire spells at the monsters, giving the students some relief.
Vicky thought that the students would help fight too.
Shido replied that civilians shouldn't be in a place like this. Roka said, "We're sorcerers, not civilians." Shido agreed, realizing they needed all the help they could get because the number of monsters was too large. The police began treating the injured students. Minato watched from a classroom window and felt relieved enough to leave them, though he found it odd that the police had arrived before the defense forces, considering this disaster was a national threat. The media announced, yet the police had reached the academy, calming the public. However, the people demanded that the noble sorcerers take action as well. In the mansion of President Fuka I of the noble sorcerers, he told his servant that these were enough to handle the situation and there was no need for nobles to intervene. He went to sleep with complete indifference to the students' lives. Meanwhile, Shido ordered one of the officers to deal with the monsters at the academy entrance. The officer answered that it was impossible because there were far too many. Shido thought to himself that the monsters were far greater in number than expected. They wouldn't be able to evacuate civilians in time. The defense forces were supposed to handle the back line, yet they hadn't arrived. They had no one left to rely on except the noble sorcerers. Shido shouted in frustration that they were completely useless. Suddenly, the demonic commander, the leader of the disaster, descended before them. It was a monster that rarely appeared in this region, and only noble sorcerers usually dealt with it. They needed at least a 5th level sorcerer to fight it, and there was no one of that level present. The demonic commander launched fire toward Yuika. Roka quickly countered with water magic and shielded Yuika with her own body. Roka fell to the ground bleeding. Yuika grabbed her in fear, calling for someone to heal her immediately. The demonic commander raised his hand, drawing 5 magic circles that released an enormous amount of fire. Yuika screamed Minato's name, begging him to save them. Minato arrived at the perfect moment, nullified the demon commander attack, and said, "Sorry for the delay." Yuika cried and begged Minato to help her sister. He reassured her that Roka would be fine, that she had only lost consciousness. Then he stood up, looking furious. Yuika asked him where he was going. He smiled gently, so she wouldn't worry, and said he was going to defeat the demon commander. Suddenly, countless magic circles appeared beneath the injured students. Minato had created them without anyone noticing, and the circles began healing all their wounds. The policewoman treating them was shocked. It was 3rd level healing magic, something very few people could perform. She rushed to Shido and found him collapsed on the ground, unable to move. She panicked and asked him what was wrong. He answered that he had simply exhausted all his magic energy, then forced himself up again to keep fighting. She shouted that what he was doing was suicide. Shido yelled back, "If we don't fight, everyone will die." She replied that all the police officers were already dead, and that the defense forces and the noble sorcerers still hadn't arrived. News spread, and the media announced that the police had been completely wiped out. The entire country lost hope. Everyone was furious at the defense forces and the noble sorcerers for abandoning them. Shido was stunned watching Minato walk alone toward the demon commander. He screamed at him to get away immediately, but Minato calmly stood his ground. The demon roared and repeated one word: destruction. Minato fired a fire bullet at him and told him to shut up. The demon grew enraged and ordered all the surrounding magical beasts to draw magic circles and attack. Minato thought to himself that during the previous disaster he had used all his power, but this time he didn't want to risk hurting the people around him. The beasts fired their beams. Shido assumed Minato was dead, but Minato blocked them all without even moving, then unleashed a barrage of multi-magic bullets that wiped out every monster instantly. Shido was speechless, unable to understand how any of this was possible. The media got excited and planned to get closer to film Minato's face, but Yuika reacted quickly and burned their camera equipment to protect Minato's identity, just like he always tried to do. A few beasts slipped past Minato and headed toward the student. Shido fired magic at them and shouted that they couldn't just stand there. They needed to support him. Minato glanced at him with a smile, thinking to himself that at least the police in this region were decent. Suddenly, the demon commander lost control and opened 6 magic circles, the level used by noble sorcerers. He unleashed the spell Great Dragon Flame, an enormous attack so powerful that everyone thought it was the end. Everyone Shido, the students, even the police, lost hope. They were certain Minato wouldn't survive such magic. Everyone except Yuika. She kept believing in him, completely confident he would win. Minato calmly watched the demon commander gathering power and thought he incredibly slow. He forcing himself to use 6th level magic. He added to himself, I can't win if I keep using 2nd level spells, but I also don't want to draw attention. Still, I have no other choice. Minato used a higher level water spell. A colossal water serpent emerged behind him and lunged at the demon Great Dragon Flame, coiling around it. The demon commander tried to resist, refusing to back down, but in the end, he couldn't stand against Minato's overwhelming power. With rage and fear, the demon asked, Why? Minato answered coldly, because you're weak, and you didn't train enough. He thought to himself that the demon might have had more power, but in the end, it turned out far weaker than he had expected. The disaster ended. The sun rose again. The sky returned to normal. Students stared in shock, unable to believe they were still alive. Celebrations broke out. Many people cried from relief. Shido looked at Minato and said in disbelief, No way. How could an ordinary student defeat the demon commander? And we don't even know if he one of the nobles or not. He collapsed from exhaustion, unable to stand. Minato approached Yuika and checked on Roka. Yuika thanked him with tears of joy, saying she knew he could do it. Suddenly, students rushed toward Minato, celebrating him and thanking him for saving them. Yuika laughed at him, watching how much he hated the attention. After everything ended, the academy announced they would not reveal Minato information to protect his privacy. They also declared that no student had suffered serious injuries. In the classroom, students surrounded Minato, thrilled as they watched the news online. They told him he had been promoted to rank S. Minato listened silently, annoyed by the crowd. When they began arguing over him, he slipped away and escaped. Outside, he found Yuika waiting for him, teasing him. He told her not to annoy him. Ignoring that, he asked if she had also been promoted to rank S. She said yes, that it was thanks to the duel and the disaster. Minato asked if she wasn't happy. She said she was, and told him her relationship with her sister was improving and they were finally getting closer, all thanks to him. She thanked him again, so he gently tapped her on the head and told her she didn't need to say it every time. She smiled, feeling truly happy. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister contacted countries all over the world about the disaster. They told him that if another one happened soon, it would be difficult for them to help, because they were also dealing with monsters on their own side. They discussed Minato, saying they couldn't believe a student handled the crisis, assuming the police were the ones who resolved it. In the end, they decided they needed to hold a meeting to prepare for the next disaster. The next day, Roka and Yuika were at home talking about the disaster and about Minato. Yuika told her that he defeated the demon commander alone using 4th level magic. Roka was shocked, since most high-ranking sorcerers couldn't even use that level. Yuika insisted she wasn't lying. He really used it. Roka smiled and told her she knew Yuika wasn't lying. She'd always been honest, kind, and hardworking. A sorcerer with those qualities could never be talentless. Roka admitted she had been too harsh on her. Yuika stood up and told her she would become stronger so Roka wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. Roka felt that her little sister had grown up and matured. The next day, Roka and Ryoji met Minato and Yuika. Suddenly, Roka asked Minato if she could become his student. She apologized for insulting him and for how she treated both him and Yuika before. Minato accepted immediately, so casually that Roka froze in disbelief. He told her she apologized, he accepted it, and everything was fine. Ryoji added that he also wanted to become Minato's student. Minato agreed just as easily. Roka still couldn't process it, so Yuika told her that just how he is. Later, the school director summoned Minato and Yuika. They found Shido there, along with his assistant Karen. The first thing they did was thank Minato for saving the city. Minato told them they had thanked him enough already, and didn't need to repeat it. Then Shido got to the point. He told Minato that the investigation regarding the disaster was finished, but something else had caught their attention. attention. Shido asked Minato whether he had awakened his power after the car accident. He explained that everyone who knew Minato had told them the same thing, except for one person who said Minato had become a completely different person, not just in strength, but in personality as well. Yuika snapped angrily and asked him what he was trying to imply. Shido paused, then changed his approach and asked Minato if he knew the Black Sorcerer. Minato was surprised. Shido showed him a video of a masked figure saving civilians at night and fighting monsters. Minato himself, only with his face hidden. Yuika argued angrily, asking what the connection was between Minato and the man in the video. Shido replied that they had the same build and were around the same age, and he heard the Black Sorcerer was a kind person who helped people, but no one that age could use that much magic. Not only that, the Black Sorcerer always appeared during Minato's free time. Shido said that using magic without a license was illegal. At first, they thought they would leave the matter to the academy if the masked sorcerer was a student, but after causing such an uproar, they had no choice but to intervene themselves. Suspension from school alone would not be enough. He told Minato that if he confessed, they would try to get him a reduced sentence, and asked him directly, "Are you the Black Sorcerer?" Minato answered calmly and without hesitation, "No, I'm not." Shido smiled, fully convinced, and said that was good. He and Karen excused themselves and left, with Shido having absolutely no doubts left. But Karen felt differently, because the Black Sorcerer had saved her once, and she recognized Minato's voice. She chose not to say anything, because he was saving people, and the city needed him. After that, Minato and Yuika went to their new Class S room, where they were surrounded by students eager to ask about the disaster, the fights, and their abilities. After a very long class, Minato left exhausted, complaining that he'd been overwhelmed with questions. That was exactly why he hadn't wanted to stand out. Then the girl he had saved twice stopped him and asked if she could have a moment. He soon found himself following her to the rooftop again, and thought to himself, why does everyone insist on talking on rooftops? Yuika watched from a distance, feeling jealous, and tried to listen to their conversation. The girl asked Minato if he remembered her. He apologized because he didn't, so she explained that he had saved her twice, once during training and once during the disaster. Minato recalled the memories and she thanked him again. He told her there was no need, he'd simply done what he had to do. Suddenly, she confessed that she liked him. Yuika was shocked, but Minato replied politely, telling the girl thank you for liking him. But he didn't have the time for anything like that. The girl thanked him for being honest and left with tears in her eyes. Minato called Yuika out and told her to stop sneaking around. She stepped forward, embarrassed, saying she thought she had hidden her mana. Minato told her mana control had gotten terrible, and she was completely exposed. Before he left, he told her to work harder on her mana control. Clearly, she hadn't trained enough. Yuika vowed to herself that she would train until the day he acknowledged her. That night, Minato patrolled the city as usual, checking whether any monsters remained. He found that their numbers had decreased drastically after the disaster. He wondered if that was a sign another one would happen soon. Suddenly, he heard someone calling for help. He rushed toward the voice and saw a man chasing a girl, about to attack her with magic. Minato landed in front of them and knocked him unconscious with a single magic strike. The girl thanked him and asked if he really was the Black Sorcerer. Minato was startled and quickly left. He thought to himself that they clearly meant him when they used that nickname, but he didn't understand why the name had spread so quickly. The next day, Minato sat with Roka, Ryoji, and Yuika on the rooftop. He asked them why the Black Sorcerer had suddenly become so famous. Ryoji told him it was because he'd gone viral on the internet. Minato was confused and asked what the internet was. The three of them were shocked. How could someone his age in this era not know what the internet was? They explained to him that it was a massive network of information where people could find anything, pictures, videos, news, and anything uploaded could spread instantly. They taught him how to use it, and Minato was thrilled and excited to learn. Then Roka interrupted and asked when he would start training them. Minato replied energetically that training would start that very day after they finished their classes. That evening, they all went to Yuika's house, where Minato trained them mercilessly until all three collapsed on the ground. He told them they were too weak. This was only the warm-up. He told them to treat training like a life-or-death battle. Fired up, they got back on their feet and attacked him again. At sunset, the school director and an investigator stood on the rooftop of a building near Tokyo Tower, looking through binoculars at an enormous number of monsters approaching. The next day, Minato continued training his students. The three of them attacked him at once, but none of them managed to break through his barrier. Suddenly, Yuika appeared behind him and told him his defense was wide open. He replied, "Nope," dodged her attack easily, and fired magic bullets straight at their heads, knocking all three of them to the ground. After taking a break, Ryoji told Minato he was incredibly strong. Roka added that even she, the top student in the school, couldn't land a single hit on him. Yuika looked at Minato's face and found him annoyed as usual. by those comments. He told them he had nearly died in a car accident and awakened his power afterward. The exact reason was completely unknown, so they should drop the subject. Roka took his words seriously and said that meant being close to death awakened his inner power. Minato smiled to himself, thinking it was great how naive they were. Yuika noticed him smiling and thought he was definitely thinking I tricked them, but she also felt he probably had his own reasons for hiding the truth. Minato became even happier, realizing they were all genuinely gullible. At sunset, Minato walked with Ryoji, who was excited about the day training. Then he said he was starving and needed to cook for his younger siblings. Minato was surprised and asked if he cooked his own meals. Ryoji said yes. Minato was even more surprised because Ryoji didn't look the type at all. Ryoji then asked Minato what he usually ate. Minato replied that he lived on instant noodles every day. Ryoji was shocked and upset that Minato wasn't eating anything healthy, so he dragged him home for a proper meal, ignoring Minato complaints. At Ryoji house, Minato saw him taking care of his 3 little siblings. After Ryoji finished cooking, he found Minato playing with them using magic and yelled at him out of fear for their safety. Then, he told Minato he hadn't expected him to be good with kids. Minato remembered the children who had died in front of him during the past disaster and said kids were precious to him. They started eating, and Minato loved Ryoji cooking. He tried to remember the last time he'd eaten homemade food and realized it had been far too long. He really hadn't been taking care of himself. Minato asked about Ryoji's parents. Ryoji said his father had died long ago and he lived with his mother who worked all day, so he handled everything at home. When she came back, he left for his own job. Minato was shocked and told him he must be incredibly busy. Ryoji smiled and said it was tough, but he didn't mind. Later that night, Minato was forced to sleep over because the kids didn't want him to leave. Ryoji apologized for dragging him into that situation, but Minato said it wasn't a bad thing to relax like that from time to time. Ryoji thanked him. Minato asked why. Ryoji said it was because of what Minato did for Roka. She clearly seemed happier now. Minato sensed he liked her and asked, but Ryoji immediately shut down the idea, saying they weren't suited for each other at all, just friends. The next morning, the two of them met Yuika and Roka, arriving late. Ryoji explained that Minato couldn't wake up. Both girls were shocked that Minato had slept at Ryoji's place. Suddenly, Shido and Karen approached them. Minato sighed in annoyance and asked if they were bothering him again. Karen apologized and said it was urgent. Monsters were appearing near Tokyo Tower, likely connected to the disaster, and they needed Minato help. Minato asked in disbelief if they remembered he was a student. Shido replied that after seeing what he did during the last disaster, it was impossible to treat him as just a student. He asked Minato to work with them. Minato agrees, thinking to himself that even though he doesn't want to draw attention again, the situation is worth it. Shido becomes extremely happy and tells them they'll compensate him financially, and not to worry about the academy, they'll handle it. Yuika and the others get excited as well and say they'll come with them. Shido politely refuses, explaining that it would be impossible for them to help. Roka insists, saying they're the top students in the school, but Shido cuts her off seriously, telling her that even if they are the top students, this is a real battlefield. Unless they're on Minato level, they all fall silent instantly because they know they're nowhere near Minato's strength. Shido gets in the car and tells Minato to hop in. Minato looks back at them with a smile and tells them they need to train harder and catch up. They all cheerfully promise they will. Minato goes with them to the police headquarters, where the Prime Minister informs everyone at the meeting that they requested help from Minato, the one who stopped the recent calamity. He asks Minato to stand so the members can see him, but murmurs of discontent immediately rise because he looks young and inexperienced. People whisper insulting comments about him, and Karen gets upset but forces herself to stay quiet because everyone outranks her. Gedo grabs the microphone and tells them Minato really was the one who stopped the academy calamity. He saw it with his own eyes. He says no one in the room comes close to Minato power, and that they desperately need his help for what lies ahead. He adds that everyone must treat Minato as a colleague, not just a student. The room becomes even more irritated when they hear he is student at all, shocked that he being compared to seasoned professionals. The Prime Minister tells them their strategy hasn't changed, whether they're a stranger among them or not. They must exterminate all the monsters as fast as possible, and everyone should return to their positions. Shido steps down from the platform and apologizes to Minato for the treatment he received. Minato replies calmly that there's no need, everyone is probably just stressed after what happened last time. Shido is surprised by how mature Minato is, unlike Karen, who starts crying suddenly. She tells them she was trying her best not to talk back. Minato smiles and tells her not to worry. He's not bothered by their words at all. Karen brightens up and comments on how kind and forgiving he is. As they leave the headquarters and drive, Minato asks about their forces. Shido explains they have 80 mid-rank sorcerers, and only a few high-rank sorcerers. Minato analyzes things silently, recalling that mid-rank sorcerers use level 2 magic, while high-rank sorcerers use level 3 magic. Shido interrupts his thoughts and tells him he knows the situation looks pathetic, but since Minato can use level 4 magic, he's their strongest weapon. Minato asks about their battle strategy. Shido answers that if there's no physical combat, they rely entirely on magic, meaning they don't really have a strategy. Minato thinks to himself that they'd be fine if the enemies were just magical beasts and demon soldiers, but demon commanders and those above them have high intelligence, which means countermeasures are necessary. He asks them if they really have no equipment. Shido answers in confusion that equipment is useless against monsters and doesn't block magic, so they usually just wear suits that allow easy movement. Minato asks if there used to be anti-magic equipment. Shido confirms yes, but now it's extremely rare and only nobles have it. Minato is shocked because such items were everywhere in the past. He asks himself what happened in the last 50 years. They arrive at Tokyo Tower and Minato is shocked by how many magical beasts are there, even though the calamity hasn't officially begun yet. The arrogant officers who resisted Minato involvement earlier immediately panic, trembling even harder when they learn a demon commander is present too. They insist he's impossible to defeat and say they need noble sorcerers. Shido tells them they already called them, but no one is coming because they're busy. There's no choice left but to handle it themselves. The officers shout angrily, asking if he expects them to march to their deaths. Shido ignores them and asks Minato if he can wipe out the monsters. Minato answers yes. A furious officer yells at him that this isn't the time for jokes, that there's no way he can do that alone. Suddenly, the sky changes color again and a new calamity erupts. Monsters appear across the entire city, chasing civilians everywhere. Minato immediately begins issuing orders, telling them their top priority is rescuing civilians and to activate their anti-calamity procedures at once. Minato looked up at the sky and thought to himself that disasters happen naturally, but this time the monsters themselves were the cause. He wondered in surprise if, after 50 years, the monsters had learned how to trigger a disaster. Suddenly the monsters changed direction and headed for the city. Tension rose among the police. Some shouted that they had to fight, while others were terrified and refused to approach the beasts. Minato mocked them inwardly, asking who would have expected the police level to fall this far. They snapped back that fear was natural. It was impossible to face that many monsters. Minato laughed, leapt, and dove into the thick of the magical beasts. The remaining monsters all saw him and swarmed toward him. He used a 3rd level Windcutter spell and wiped out every beast that got close. The demonic soldiers roared in anger and, all at once, drew magic circles and launched a barrage of huge rocks. Minato stood there calmly and let his barrier repel the attack without flinching. When their volley ended, he struck back, using Windcutter again to kill a great number of them. Shido watched with pride and thought to himself how incredible Minato's power was. He used multiple types of magic simultaneously. Shido ordered the rest of the police to follow Minato. Ashamed of their earlier cowardice, they moved quickly and began the counterattack. Minato observed them and thought they were stronger than he'd expected. Suddenly, the leader appeared, surrounded by a massive dark energy. The officers panicked, saying only legendary-level sorcerers could handle that foe. But Minato surprised them by drawing many magic circles of different elements before the leader, and he told them he would defeat the leader and leave the rest to them. He fired and killed the leader minions. Encouraged, the police pressed the attack as Minato fought. He remembered that the first global disaster had happened 60 years ago, and that disasters had followed one another since. If this repeated, the calamities would sweep and destroy the entire world. He refused to allow that to happen while he lived, and he pressed on. When he noticed Karen in danger, he rushed to her and cut down the demonic soldier who was about to kill her. Karen felt déjà vu. The scene was exactly like what the Black Sorcerer had done before, and her doubts about Minato deepened. She wondered why someone like him would be the Black Sorcerer, and how he could wield such power. She was afraid to ask directly for fear he might hate her. Another demonic soldier attacked, and Minato saved her again. He observed that Karen only knew healing magic and could not defend herself, so he told her to stay close. Then another variant of the demon leader appeared, a stronger clone. The police were terrified. Even Shido struggled to keep his composure. The team lost hope and said even noble sorcerers wouldn't be able to handle this. Suddenly, Minato strode confidently toward the monsters. They yelled at him not to go, pleading that nobody could handle them. He answered with confident sarcasm that of course he could. Shido ordered the team to strike the demon leader. They all unleashed spells at once, but the leader shrugged off their magic. Minato approached the monster, standing without a shred of fear. The demon asked him bluntly what he was. Minato replied, "Just a student." The demon stared in bafflement. A tremendous energy began to pour from Minato. The demon prepared dozens of magic circles and unleashed a 6th-level dragon flame. Minato worried that dodging or countering that attack might hurt the civilians around them. Unexpectedly, every magical beast trained its fire on Minato and fired their beams at him simultaneously. Karen screamed for him to run, but he remained rooted, utterly calm. Water magic circles surged around him, and a gigantic water serpent erupted to intercept the dragon flame, while his barrier formed to block the beast's beams. The leader was stunned and could not comprehend what he saw. Minato mocked him. "Is that all you've got?" Everyone watched with open mouths, astonished as if seeing him for the first time. Shidao told Karen that only noble sorcerers could use 6th-level magic, and more shockingly, Minato had used 2 types of magic at the same time. A sorcerer normally cast 1 element at a time, using 2 simultaneously suggested. He exceeded even the noble's power. Shidao intuition confirmed itself. This was the person he'd been searching for. The second incarnation of Ishikami Atsumo. The demon commander lashed out physically. Minato lifted him into the air with wind magic to avoid harming bystanders. The demon admitted it could fly on its own and accused Minato of preventing reinforcements. Minato replied calmly that he didn't care if every one of the leader beasts helped. He'd brought the fight here, so he wouldn't hold himself back. The monster attacked with rapid blows. Minato dodged them expertly, though one strike staggered him and the commander then blasted him with flame. The fire struck and sent Minato flying farther. The leader pursued, slamming him down toward the ground with full force. Minato crashed, and when the smoke cleared, the leader was shocked to find him unharmed. The leader screamed, "How?" Minato took to the air again and said there was no point in magic now. They'd fight hand to hand. He landed the first punch, telling the demon its blows wouldn't affect him. He followed with a second blow that hurled the leader away. The commander shouted in disbelief, "Impossible! How can a mere human have this strength?" "Who are you exactly?" Minato answered with sarcasm. "Did you think I only know magic? I'll show you my own technique." Minato gathers an enormous amount of energy around his body, rising high and glowing in different colors, a force so intense that everyone around can sense it. The demon leader roars, saying that even if Minato covers himself in magic, human attacks could never harm their kind. In an instant, Minato appears right in front of him and says, "Let's test that," before punching him with tremendous power, sending magical shockwaves through the demon body. Then Minato kicks him hard, leaving the demon stunned, unable to comprehend how a human blows could damage him. The demon charges at Minato in rage, but Minato's speed surpasses him completely. He dodges effortlessly and counters with a devastating strike that creates a hole in the demon torso. The sky returns to its normal color, and the disaster ends. The police squad stare in disbelief at what they just witnessed. Shido tells his team not to lose focus and to finish off the remaining monsters. Minato lands on the ground and sees the entire police squad lined up in a row. Shido thanks him for saving the city from another disaster, and everyone salutes him. After this event, disasters begin appearing all over the world, one after another. People start blaming the police, saying they're useless. A new opinion spreads among the public. The Black Mage is the only one they trust to fight disasters, their only hope. The next day, Minato goes to school, and the students surround him again, asking endless questions about the second disaster he stopped. As usual, Minato gets annoyed by the constant flood of questions. The teacher enters the classroom and interrupts them, announcing that today's lesson will be about the recent disaster. She reminds the students that although they are still young, they are mages and they can be summoned at any moment, so they must always be prepared. She glances at Minato and adds, "Especially since we have a very experienced student here." Suddenly, Karen bursts into the classroom, shocking the teacher, who asks what's going on. Karen explains that they're from the police and got permission from the chief. She asks Minato to come with them. Minato notices all the students staring at him in awe. When he steps outside with Karen, he asks her to explain the situation. She tells him not to worry. He'll receive a reward and all his academic credits. Then, she explains that after the disaster, a massive number of monsters began appearing all around the world, and because of that, unlicensed organizations and rogue mages also began to move. The police force alone can't keep up. She apologizes for calling him all the time, but there's simply no one else with his strength. Minato tells her it's fine, but asks her to call him next time, instead of creating a scene inside the classroom. She apologizes again. He asks what they need him to do. Karen explains that they wanted to deal with the monsters in the Harajuku area. Minato agrees, and she says they'll go together by car, but before she finishes the sentence, Minato has already disappeared ahead of them, saying, "You'll be late, I'll go first." Meanwhile, Harajuku is already in the middle of a disaster. disaster. Two children are trapped by a magical beast that about to devour them. The older brother grabs the younger one and tries to escape, but the little one falls, and the monster opens its jaws wide, only for Minato to arrive at that exact moment and fire magic straight into its mouth. He approaches the children with a smile and tells them, "Well done." They thank him, and Minato quickly moves on. He continues killing monsters carefully because this time the situation is harder. There are more civilians around, and too many obstacles prevent him from using magic freely. Even though he can sense the difference between human magic and monster magic, he can't afford to attack recklessly because some people have no magic at all and could get hurt. The only real solution is to evacuate the civilians. Meanwhile, the police tell each other to focus on defeating monsters and to leave the evacuation to the army and warriors. Minato spots the officer who used to mock him back at police headquarters, so he drops down and asks him what the situation is. The officer replies that they couldn't even save half the civilians and they can't reach the eastern side. Minato tells him he'll go there himself. Before he leaves, the officer warns him that there are unlicensed mages in that area. Minato arrives at the eastern side and uses 6th level water magic to annihilate most of the monsters. He saves many people, who thank him with tears in their eyes. But Minato feels uneasy. The level of each disaster keeps escalating, and he fears that one day it will reach a point even he can't handle. After the disaster ends with minimal damage, the officer thanks Minato and tells him that thanks to him, they managed to contain the situation. Minato shakes his hand and humbly tells him he didn't do anything, that the credit belongs to the police and firefighters, and he only assisted them. The officer becomes even more impressed with Minato and feels ashamed of how he treated him before. He and the rest of the police bow deeply and apologize. Minato tells them there's no need and that he understands how they feel. The officer replies that Minato is truly a mature person and thanks him. Elsewhere in the capital, there is a guild of unlicensed mages called the Black Revolution. Their leader, Kuro, receives a full report about the Black Mage. He becomes furious, saying, "How dare an unlicensed mage, who belongs to no guild, challenge us?" He orders his men to find him, saying they can use force if they want. The head of the Kabuki branch, Kaga, asks if they're allowed to kill him. Kuro smiles and answers, "After you torture him first, of course." Kaga gets excited, his face showing bloodthirsty intent. The next day at the Mizuha house after training, Roka asks Minato, "How much magic power do you have?" Yuika immediately pays attention, extremely curious, expecting it to be maybe 100,000 or 500,000. But Minato shocks them by saying, "You see them in my 1,990,000. They don't believe him and say it a huge exaggeration, since Ishikami Atasumo himself once said his magic power was only 1 million. Minato is surprised because Atasumo never said that back when he knew him. Yuika tells him that 1 million is the highest a mage can reach. Minato gets confused and tries searching online, but he has already forgotten how to use the internet. Suddenly his phone rings, and it's Shido calling. Minato answers, and Shido asks him to put it on speaker so his friends can hear. Shido tells them that because the monsters increased and disasters keep happening, they decided to form a special anti-monster unit, and they want Minato to be the leader. Everyone is shocked, because this is a rank any mage dreams of their whole life. Riki says, "There's no way he'll refuse." But surprisingly, he actually does refuse. Shido tells him, "Let me explain first. There are many problems the police can't handle. With how things are, we can't fight monsters alone, and I think you're the one who understands that the most." Minato asks what happened to the noble mages. Shido says Mizuha, Homorai, and Kaiichi never returned from the international meeting, and the only leader left is Fuka, but many things happened with him. He explains that Minato unit will include police captains and his friends, and all he needs to do is lead and develop the mages. Shido adds that Minato will be rewarded, and that he's the only one capable of doing this job. Minato agrees, and his friends join as well. Meanwhile, the media talks about how the noble Fuka family is being heavily criticized because they didn't show up during the school disaster and have been slow in fighting monsters. The head of the Fuka family angrily says, "Do these fools really think we're responsible for solving all their problems?" His assistant enters the office and informs him that the police sent a document announcing the formation of a special mage unit. Fuka gets angry at first, but eventually calms down and sees it as something that may quiet people for a while. Elsewhere, Minato and his friends arrive at the police headquarters. Minato jokes about Shido promising a huge number of members, but only 6 people are standing there. Shado explains that many participants applied, but their requests didn't go through, and that once the training results show, more people will apply later. He gives Minato and the whole unit temporary mage badges to show that they're working with the police and protecting civilians. Temporary, because they're still students and not official mages yet. Minato gets excited and introduces himself to the unit. The first thing he promises them is that he'll make them stronger than the noble mages. Everyone is shocked, and Minato decides to prove it. He asks Shado if there are magic power measuring devices. Shado says yes and takes him to them. Minato asks Roka and Ryuji to measure their magic power, explaining to the unit that Roka used to have 10,000 and Ryuji 8,000. They both pour their power into the devices and are shocked to see Roka reach 30,000 and Ryuji 28,000. They both move to a higher rank of magic. Minato tells them it's too early to be surprised. Yuika is next. Yuika gets nervous, afraid the gap between her and her sister might be huge, but she still decides to check no matter what. She freezes in shock when she sees her power reach 26,000, even though she used to have only 2,000. Shado says it's impossible for someone magic power to rise that much. Minato approaches Yuika and tells her that increasing magic power is possible, and what she needs is talent and determination. He places his hand on her head and tells her he's proud of her. Yuika cries from overwhelming happiness. He looks at Roka and Ryuji and tells them they also did great. Roka replies arrogantly, claiming it normal because she's from the Mizuha family and doesn't need praise. Minato puts his hand on her head as well, congratulating her. Roka, Ryuji, and Yuika panic because Roka usually gets angry at things like that, but they're shocked when she accepts it normally and thinks to herself that it's the first time anyone has ever put their hand on her head. Even her father never did that. Suddenly, Sho, the eldest son of the Fuka family, walks in and tells them to greet him properly. Shado nervously says he thought Sho wasn't coming, but Sho says he changed his mind. Shado introduces him to the team and to Minato as the leader. Shado leans towards Minato and whispers that they had no choice but to get approval from a noble mage, so they had to include him in the unit. Minato asks if the Fuka family is the same one that refused to help during the school disaster. Shado says yes. Sho mocks the unit because they're just students and newbies. Shado responds that Minato is the student who stopped all the previous disasters alone. Sho approaches Minato arrogantly and says, "You're the one who stopped the disaster? A regular person, not even a noble all." Then he steps on Minato's foot with all his strength and tells him not to act superior. Yuika and the others get angry and yell at him to back away from Minato. Sho looks at them and recognizes Roka and Yuika since they are also from noble families. Suddenly he orders Shado to make him the leader of the unit. Shado gets nervous and says Minato was already chosen. Sho replies, "Then we'll fight for it. The one who kills the next disaster leader will be the commander." Without waiting for a response, he leaves with his followers. Shio apologizes to Minato, who says it's fine because talking to Sho won't solve anything, and defeating him in the challenge will be easy. The next day at the Metropolitan Police Department area, Minato gathers his unit and starts explaining magic power to them. He tells them that magic power is the energy that produces magic, but it also has other uses. Then he asks Ryuji to attack him with full strength. Ryuji hesitates but follows the order, and he's shocked when he sees the magic barrier around Minato's body. Minato tells them that if they have enough magic power, they can use magic unconsciously. This is called automatic magic. Increasing magic power is extremely important. Minato pours magic into the bodies of the police members, the same way he did with his friends, and starts a very intense training session. When he returns home, he starts thinking about how they need equipment that resists magical creatures. He remembers that Shide told him it impossible to obtain such gear now, and asked him to wait. Minato then gets the idea to try making it himself. Assuming there are no craftsmen left in this era, he gets excited and searches his room for anything useful. He finds a cheap ring, but in very good condition, and thinks it might work, although it won't be enough. His phone rings, and it's Roka calling. He answers, and she tells him no one deserves to be the leader except him. Minato laughs sarcastically and asks if that's her way of encouraging him. She says yes. Then he takes the chance and tells her he wants to buy some accessories, asking her to come with him because he doesn't know where to get them. Roka tells him it's no problem, and they agree to meet in Harajuku. Minato first tries adjusting the ring he found, then plans to buy rings for the rest of his team. Meanwhile, Yuika goes to Roka's room to tell her dinner is ready, but she's surprised when she doesn't answer. She opens the door and finds Roka oddly excited, choosing clothes like she has an important meeting, and Yuika fears it might be with Minato. So Yuika decides to follow Minato from a distance, hiding her mana this time, so he won't notice. Roka arrives looking so beautiful that everyone around stares at her, and when she meets Minato, people around get jealous. Yuika is stunned that Roka really came to meet him. Minato and Roka walk together, and she asks what he wants to buy. He answers, rings, so she asks if it's a gift. He says kind of, but I need a lot, which shocks Roka, making her think he likes a lot of girls, while he actually means his team members. They walk through many shops, but Minato feels every ring is lacking something. Later, they stop at a cafe to rest, and Minato thinks about lowering his requirements so he can find something suitable. Roka interrupts his thoughts, saying she doesn't know how to show kindness, and that he probably understands her personality. He says he does. She admits she can't deal well with Yuika, and knows it hurts her, then adds that Yuika would have been more helpful today. Minato replies that not true. Roka searched all over the place with him and helped him a lot. After that, they visit another store and finally choose the rings. Minato leaves in a great mood, and Roka tells him the others will definitely love them since he picked them so carefully. He answers that he had to do that because they'll be used as equipment, making Roka realize she misunderstood everything. Minato thanks her for helping him, then takes out the ring he made earlier that morning, puts it on her hand and says, it's the first special ring he crafted himself. She should take care of it. Roka blushes hard, panics, and walks away quickly, while Minato thinks he'll explain the equipment idea later. The next day, Minato begins distributing the rings to his team after infusing them with wind magic to make them resistant to magic beasts. He tells them that if they channel their mana into the rings, they'll produce first-level spells. Shido asks, in shock, where he got them, and Minato casually replies that he made them, shocking him even more. Craftsmen capable of this are almost extinct. Minato then says the team still lacks fast movement, since they can't always rely on cars. Shido agrees. They're always late. Minato shows them how he uses wind magic to fly, and explains that the rings will help them do it. They start practicing, and Yuika is the only one who succeeds on her first attempt. While the others struggle with flying, Minato asks Yuika about Ishikami Atsumu. She explains that his power was around 1 million, he used various spells, and he died fighting the Demon King in the Great Calamity. Minato asks what happened to sorcerers after his death. Yuika says most sorcerers vanished, and the remaining ones were mainly noble families who helped revive magic. Since then, all records and knowledge about magic disappeared, so sorcery research had to restart from zero. Minato thinks back. He remembers many sorcerers dying, but he's certain plenty of magic books still existed. He hid them in different places for the future, yet modern magic culture is full of mistakes, and magical power levels are extremely low. He wonders if this happened by coincidence or someone interfered. Yuika notices he's distracted and asks what wrong. He says nothing. She nervously tells him he can talk to her if something is wrong. Even if she's not worthy of trust, she'll try. Minato says he knows she means well and that she already helped him a lot. Then he thinks he can trust her not to leak anything, but he doesn't want her dragged into danger. And if she learned Ishikami Atsumu her idol, she might faint. Yuika assumes he doesn't trust her because she's still weak and decides she must grow stronger so he can rely on her. After a week of harsh training, Minato asks the group to show their progress. He finds that everyone's power increased, and even Karin can now use offensive magic. He notices a perfect balance forming between Yuika and Roka. Their power is nearly equal. Minato praises them but warns them not to slack off just because they improved. He explains that magical rank doesn't always reflect magical strength. Then he asks Roka to cast a 4th level spell on him. She does, and Minato cancels it using 1st level earth magic, shocking everyone. He explains that ranks increase the potential of combining mana with spells, but higher rank doesn't always mean the spell is stronger. A 1st level spell backed by massive mana can overpower a weak 4th level one. Element order also matters. For example, earth cancels water. In short, they must raise their mana capacity, not just their magic rank. Suddenly, Sho enters and mocks Minato for not being a noble. Shido asks why he came, and Sho answers that the calamity hasn't happened yet and he's bored. Shido tells him to go kill some monsters if he has nothing to do. Sho refuses, saying it too much trouble. He'll leave it to the police. Everyone gets annoyed and disgusted by his attitude. Sho then says he hopes the next calamity starts soon, and suddenly, the sky changes color and the calamity begins. Sho and his followers fly off to kill the first calamity boss, so Minato and the rest of the squad fly after them. Yuika asks how he this fast despite his large build. Minato notices that Sho and his followers are skilled in wind magic, which means Yuika and the others must push themselves to keep up. He thinks to himself that he could finish everything alone, but that would go against the principle of teamwork. Sho mocks them for not being able to catch up. They reach the monsters and start taking them down, but Sho and his group don't bother protecting civilians. Their spells go out of control and are about to hit 2 people. Minato lands in front of them at the perfect moment, blocking the spell with his barrier. He yells at Sho, unleashing a wave of magic so strong it forces Sho and his followers to freeze in place. Yuika and the others arrive and shout at Sho as well. Sho arrogantly replies that it's the civilians' fault for standing in the way of a noble sorcerer like him, then walks away with his followers, saying he'll go take down the Calamity boss while they can focus on the pointless task of saving civilians. Minato tells his squad he'll rescue the civilians and that they should focus on the magic beasts. They carry out the order immediately and begin striking the monsters. For the first time, Yuika realizes she's no longer afraid of fighting them. Minato stands still, sensing the mana of his squad mixing with that of the civilians. He knows rescuing them will be hard, but still launches forward at high speed to minimize casualties. Suddenly, a massive demon appears, and they all feel its overwhelming power. Sho loudly claims it is prey, and says he'll show them a 4th level spell. His followers warn that a demon and a spell won't beat it, but he insists confidently, few people in history have fought demons, so they won't know unless they try. Since he's a noble sorcerer, he believes it natural for him to win. He fires a 4th level wind spell, but the demon summons an enormous wave of flames that erases it instantly. Sho is stunned that his invincible spell didn't do anything, and he flees with his followers. Minato arrives quickly and uses water magic, with the squad supporting him, canceling the demon flames. Yuika marches toward Sho angrily and shouts at him for putting civilians in danger. Sho answers selfishly, saying it's their fault for not running away. If they get in a noble sorcerer way, they might as well die. Yuika punches him across the face with all her strength. She tells him he a noble sorcerer, with no sense of pride, then walks away with the rest of the squad. Sho followers tell him they should leave because they can't handle the monsters. He thinks they're right. The beasts are too powerful even for someone like him. But then he gets an idea. They'll let Minato's squad fight the boss and finish it off themselves at the end. His followers are impressed and agree. Meanwhile, Minato's squad fires all their magic at the boss, but nothing affects it. Roka tells them they need a 4th level spell or a massive amount of mana. The demon gathers flames again, so they fly away to dodge. Yuika thinks to herself that its spell is even stronger than before and seems to overpower her own mana. She believes there's no way for them to win like this. Minato speaks through their earpieces, telling them to unite. Yuika says they're already doing that, but he explains he means literally combine their power, specifically Yuika and Roka. He refuses to explain further so they can think for themselves. The demon fires again, and they rush to figure out Minato hint. Yuika says the boss spell is strong but takes time to cast, so they should handle the small monsters first and avoid the demon big attacks. They listen immediately, and Minato notices from their voices that Yuika has started leading the team. He's surprised since he expected Ryoji or Roka to take command, but realizes Yuika's ability to read people makes her the best suited. Yuika keeps analyzing Minato words until an idea hits her. She thinks it might be ridiculous, but decides to try. She gathers the team and explains her plan, and they trust her completely. Ryoji carries Roka while Shido carries Yuika, taking off at full speed. Karin uses healing magic to keep them going. Minato thinks to himself that it's a smart plan. Roka and Yuika activate their water magic at the same time, forming a combined 6th level spell. This time it hits the demon hard, though it doesn't kill it. Sho tells his followers that this is their chance to steal the finishing blow. But suddenly Sho feels his mana draining. Minato used his magic drain ability on them, and before Sho can react, the demon suddenly collapses. It had already been dying from their attack, and the calamity ends. The entire squad celebrates. They stop the calamity themselves this time. Yuika and Roka collapse from mana exhaustion, but they're smiling, proud of what they achieved. The next day at the police headquarters, Minato praises the entire squad for the incredible performance they showed in their first mission. He tells them he's certain they'll grow even stronger, then adds that Yuika's progress in particular was exceptional. He tells her he heard all the instructions she gave during the fight, and that every single one of them was correct. He asks if she already knew the combination technique called Grand Magic. She replies that she had no idea. Minato is shocked and asks how she pulled it off, and she answers, "Your hint, and the rest was just my own effort." Minato checks the clock and says, "It's time," before turning on the TV to a press conference with the Prime Minister discussing the recent calamity. The Prime Minister tells reporters that the purpose of forming the Special Magic Unit is to reinforce the police force after the number of monsters increased dramatically. A reporter asks whether it's true that the squad leader is a student from the Magic Academy and that he the one who stopped the calamity. Shido stands up, introduces himself, and says yes, the squad leader is indeed a student student. Everyone is shocked. Shido continues, explaining that this student power surpasses even the noble sorcerers, who didn't show up during the academy calamity and left both citizens and the police to suffer. That was when Minato appeared and saved them all. He says he convinced Minato is the savior who should be responsible for protecting this region, and that no one is more reliable for this role. Minato thinks to himself, the trouble has officially begun. Reporters tell Shido that his statements are extremely dangerous. Forming a squad without the noble sorcerers implies stripping them of their authority. Another reporter responds by saying it true the nobles never responded to previous calamities, especially the Fuka family, whose reputation has plummeted. Even though the other noble families were out of the country, their lack of response was still negligence. The Prime Minister answers that the police rely heavily on noble sorcerers, and that forming this new squad doesn't mean abandoning them. Suddenly, Sho barges in, ignoring the guards trying to stop him. He declares that the current squad leader is unfit, and that a noble sorcerer like him should hold the position instead. Shido angrily asks why he here, and reminds him he lost the bet. Sho covers his ear mockingly and says he doesn't remember any such thing. He declares that his orders as a noble sorcerer should be the top priority, and that commoners must obey without talking back. A female reporter interrupts and asks him a question. Sho immediately ignores Shido and allows her to speak. She says they received information that he didn't help citizens during the calamity and even dragged them into the battle. Sho panics and denies it, but other reporters join in, saying they received the same information and even have photos and videos. Whispering spreads through the entire room as people question how a noble sorcerer could behave like that. They accuse him angrily, saying nobles are supposed to protect citizens, and putting them in danger is unacceptable. Sho explodes and yells at them to shut up, that it's the citizens' fault for standing in a noble sorcerer way, and that commoners should keep their mouths shut. Shoto replies that everyone now knows the noble sorcerers are corrupt. They need heroes who protect people sincerely, like their special squad. They don't need nobles who refuse to protect citizens. Sho becomes furious and storms out with his followers. Meanwhile, Yuika is holding a tablet and is shocked to see a video showing all of them clearly, faces exposed. Minato is upset, realizing he won't be able to hide his identity anymore. A week later, Minato is stunned to see the squad overflowing with new members. Shido explains that thanks to the press conference, they received a huge number of volunteers. Yuika tells Minato to just accept the situation. There's no way the world will look away from him now. Elsewhere, in a dark building, the enforcer from the illegal sorcerer guild Black Rebellion threatens a man to force him to talk about the black sorcerer. The terrified man, tied up, insists he already told them everything. He's just a boy with terrifying magic and that all he knows. The enforcer stabs his leg and tells him he's sure he knows more. The man quickly adds that the police are searching for him, and rumors say he's a student in the magic academy. Once the enforcer gets what he wants, he kills the man. Excited, he says he can't wait to find the black sorcerer and hear him scream in agony.